Okay, well, according to my computer, we now have the recording turned on and we are good to go. So, drop the checkered flag, let the games begin. Today is, I usually like to check with the date to start class. Today is Wednesday, September 26th. And just in case you forget, it's the year 2018. And I'm glad to see that all of you have a piece of paper and a pencil to take notes. And so to start class each week, we're going to have a little spiritual thought, and then we're going to have an opening prayer. And since none of you were prepared with the spiritual thought today, I took that upon myself to share one with you. And then I'm going to ask Sister Fluckiger to give us an opening prayer. Okay? Okay, so spiritual thought today is section 88 of the Doctrine and Covenants, and this is one of my favorite scriptures about stuff you need to learn. So 77 says, "And I give unto you a commandment, that you shall teach one another the doctrine of the kingdom." And then he gives a list. "Teach ye diligently, and my grace shall attend you." Well, I'm going to teach diligently, and I'll be happy to get some grace. "That you may be instructed more perfectly," and now here's a list, "in theory, in principle, in doctrine." Notice that he mentions both principle and doctrine. Those are different things. "In the law of the gospel, in all things that pertain unto the kingdom of God that are expedient for you to understand." And then now here's the list, verse 79. "Of things both in heaven." What's some things in heaven? Stars. So you need to study astronomy. Anything else in heaven? How about planets? Sun. Okay, solar system, the moon. Okay, things in heaven. Anything else in heaven? How about clouds? Would you say clouds are in heaven? So you need to study meteorology. Okay, things in heaven and in the earth. What's in the earth? Minerals, geology, and what? Water, rocks, animals, worms. Yes, so you need to study. Okay, so there's a bunch of things there that can be studied. Not on the earth, unfortunately. Okay, yeah, in heaven and in the earth and under the earth. Okay, so there's a difference there. Things in the earth and things under the earth. I suppose things in the earth would be, all the things on the earth, and the under the earth would be all the things we just mentioned, the rocks and the dirt and the water and the worms. Things which have been.
History.
There you go. Things which have been is history. Things which are current events. Okay? Things which must shortly come to pass.
Future.
Revelation and prophecy. We want to learn about what's going to happen next. Things which are at home, which would be domestic affairs in our own country, in our own state, in our own town,
In our own home.
in our own house. Things which are abroad, foreign countries, things that are happening in the rest of the world. The wars and the perplexities of the nations. Why would the Lord command us to learn about wars? Why is the Book of Mormon so full of wars? That is a big part of history. As a matter of fact, if I look back over our history curriculum at our history dates, it's almost all about wars. That's a big deal. And the judgments which are on the land, that has to do with, again, the fulfillment of Scripture. The judgments which are on the land. Again, the Book of Mormon is full of that. You talk about what the prophets told the people was going to happen to them if they didn't repent, and that it did happen. And a knowledge also of countries and kingdoms. Okay, so that's like what? Geography, learning about all the different countries in the world. And why? In verse 80, he says, why? That ye may be prepared in all things when I shall send you again to magnify the calling whereunto I have called you. What's the calling whereunto you have been called? As children of the house of Israel and the covenant people of Abraham. The calling wherein you have been called is to take the gospel to all the world, and the mission with which I have commissioned you. Okay? So the Lord is saying you need to prepare yourself mentally by gaining all this knowledge so that you can be prepared to be more effective as missionaries, as ambassadors of the Lord. So that is, I think, a significant thing. That should give you some motivation to...
Was that section 77?
That was section 88, starting in verse 77
Okay.
and going to verse 80. Okay. Okay. All right, so here we go. I'll see if I can make this work. Introduction to U.S. history, or introduction to the study of history. Let's see what we can talk about. First of all, I'm going to say, what's history? Well, before I say that, let me say this. When I was in high school, when I was your age, history was my absolutely most hated subject. I couldn't stand it. I saw no point in it. It was just a memorizing of a bunch of names and dates. Yeah, it made no sense to me. I thought people that studied history were losers. There was a guy that actually I knew in college that majored in history, and I thought, what are you going to do with that? You can't get any kind of job majoring in history. What a loser you are. And now guess what my favorite subject is. It's actually not history. It's probably economics, but they go so together and hand in hand with history. So when I talk about history, and I'm going to make a distinction for you on the next slide. History is the stuff that actually happened in the past, okay? Then that branch of knowledge dealing with past events, a record of past events, the aggregate of past events. It's actually what happened in the past. When you are studying history, you think you are studying the things that actually happened in the past, but actually you're not. You're studying what somebody thought or what somebody wrote about the things that happened in the past. And when we say historiography, there's a combination word. What's the suffix graphy refer to? Yin-Yang? I think you know. What's graphy? If a word that ends in graphy, what is it about? What is it? Keeping a chart. What about the word graphics? What's graphics? We think of graphics as picture, but it's actually writing. Anything you write down is graphic, right? So historiography is writing down of history. What about biography? What's a biography? What's bio, the prefix bio for? What's biology? It's the study of bio. What's bio? You mean you were walking around all these years saying these words and having no clue what they mean?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
What is bio? That's I think a Greek origin, isn't it? Bio is life. Bio is life. So when I have a biography, I'm writing down about a life. What if I have an autobiography? Then that would be my own life, right? Writing about my own life. Okay, so there's lots of words that end in graphy. I'm not going to take time to give you a bunch more of them. But what historians do is they study these past events, and then they write down a summary of them for us to read. So when we are reading history, we are reading somebody's interpretation of past events. Now, it just so happens that since 4000 BC until now, over 6,000 years, a lot of stuff has happened. And you don't have enough time to learn about all of it. So how are you going to decide what you should learn and what you should not learn, what you should care about, what you should not care about? Let me ask you this. How many of you think it's a good idea to read the scriptures every day? Do you realize that reading the scriptures is reading history? It is, isn't it? The Old Testament, the New Testament, even the Doctrine and Covenants, the Book of Mormon. It's history. We're reading about stuff that happened a long time ago. And so that means that when you sit down to study history, the very first thing you have to ask yourself is, whose lens, through whose lens am I studying this history? And here's the problems we have with that. There's two problems I'm going to mention: bias and agenda. What is bias? When you hear someone that is biased, what are you saying about them? Okay, they have a set opinion. They're already partial to one opinion. Let me ask a seamstress this question. When I cut fabric on a bias, how am I cutting it, Diane?
Across the grain, so it's straight.
You're going across the grain. You're going at an angle. Okay? So when somebody has a bias, they have an angle. They have a certain perspective that they're supporting in their own mind. Okay? And what's an agenda? A reason or a purpose. I have an agenda. I have something I'm trying to accomplish with study of history. Okay? And so when I have an agenda, it's very easy for me to pick through the historical facts and say, oh, look at this event. Oh, look at this event. Oh, look at this event. These things all support my agenda. But I forgot about that event and that event and that event that completely contradict my agenda. Okay? So what's the agenda of the history that you're studying? Now, for example, how many of you know anything about U.S. history already? Here's a couple of events that are rather famous events from U.S. history. Paul Revere's ride, you remember? Henry Wadsworth Longfellow was a famous American poet, and he wrote, "Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. And I'm going to tell you this wonderful, fascinating, historical epic saga." And he wrote this poem in, 1890 or something like that. And guess what? He made up all the stuff about Paul Revere's ride. It's not based on fact at all. Okay? But it makes really, really good storytelling. And what about Molly Pitcher? How many of you ever heard of Molly Pitcher? Oh, okay, well, she was a real person, but the myth about Molly Pitcher is not factual. The myth that you learned in public school about Molly Pitcher is false. How about the famous in the debates in the Virginia State House, where Patrick Henry was supporting the cause of rebellion against Great Britain. And he stood up and gave this speech, and he said, "Give me liberty or give me death." And that was the conclusion of the speech, and everybody clapped and sat down, and then we had everybody decided they want to have a Revolutionary War. Guess when this "give me liberty" speech or "give me death" speech was written? At least 50 years after Patrick Henry was dead. It was never recorded while he was alive. There's no contemporary evidence that said he ever said such a thing.
Oh, well, I think it was taken from memory, right?
It was taken from second-hand, third-hand, fourth-hand memory. Everybody agreed it was a really great speech, but nobody's really sure what it said. Okay? The winter at Valley Forge. How many of you seen George Washington? Turn around and look behind you there. There's George Washington kneeling down by his horse in the snowstorm at Valley Forge. The most severe winter that the American soldiers ever had to suffer through while they were struggling and fighting against the British for our freedom. It's a myth. Okay, there's no, we know that George Washington was a man of prayer, that he did pray, but the story about how that painting came to be was completely invented. It was completely invented. Okay, the shot heard around the world, the Battle of Bunker Hill. I mean, this is the tip of the iceberg, my friends. What I'm telling you is that there's a lot of history that people know that is flat out false. Okay, why? Why do we have all these false stories about history? Because of what?
Bias
bias and agenda. Now, let me ask you this question. If you were a historian and you wanted to write a history book that would make you a lot of money, for whom and to whom would you write that book?
The rich,
For who?
the rich and the popular.
The rich and the, you think the rich people buy more history books than anybody else?
I think they would curtail their book to go towards the popular. Right?
Okay, that's a good thought. I don't agree with your thought.
Okay.
Who is what organization or what group of people is the #1 consumer of history books in the world? By miles and miles. Schools. What organization runs the schools? The government runs the schools. So if I write a history book that is unflattering of the government, do you think they're going to buy my book for $100 a piece and buy thousands and thousands and thousands of them for all of the school kids in my country? No. Okay, so here's a term that's not on the slide you need to put on your notes. It's called court historian. What is a court historian? How many of you ever heard of a court jester? What's a court jester?
So, clown.
A clown who works for who?
The king.
The king. Okay, he works for the king, and his job is to make the king laugh. Okay? Court historian is a historian who works for the king. Now, what historians work for the king? Well, basically all of them. Because there's no way to make any money writing history for run-of-the-mill adult people that go to the bookstore to buy books. I mean, how many people are going to buy books? 10, 20, maybe 1,000? But how many history books for $100, $200 a piece are going to get sold for public school kids? And the answer is millions of them. Okay? So if you can become distinguished a salesman of government history books that the government likes to buy, you can become wealthy. Okay? And that's what we call a court historian, somebody who has a bias and agenda of making our country look like the best country in the world. Okay? Did you ever go to a football game and it says, we're #1, we're #1? Did you ever go to any kind of patriotic event and they say, America's #1, America, like the Olympics. Every year we have the Olympics, or not every year, every 4 years we have the Olympics. And people look at the Olympics and say, what country's the best country? The country that wins the most gold medals, right? They're the best country in the world. How do you decide what the best country in the world is? Do you think that that's an agenda in public school to teach kids that America is the best country in the world? We have the best culture, we have the best language, we have the best history, we have the best leaders, we have won all of the wars we ever fought, we beat everybody, we have the most gold medals, we are the best country in the world, right? Is that, and how would you decide which country is the best country in the world? What's your standard for determining the best country? Okay, so what I'm going to say to you is it's subjective. Everybody has their different ideas. Maybe I'd like to live in the country in the country in the world that is the freest. I want to have the greatest liberty, the lowest amount of taxes, and the greatest liberty to do whatever I want to do. Is that America? No, it's not. Okay, so we have a problem with bias and agenda that we need to deal with when we study history. And how do we deal with it? Well, do I have an agenda? Yes, I do. And my agenda is to seek for the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you, ma'am. Okay? And that is sometimes not so easy to find. What's our bias? Now I'm going to talk to you about this word, paradigm. Do any of you understand the word paradigm? Did you learn that in 7 Habits of Effective Teenagers? Okay, what is a paradigm, Ethan? Tell me about paradigm. It's your point of view. I like to think of it as a pair of sunglasses that you wear. If I have pink sunglasses on and I wear them all the time, I can never take them off. I look at the world and everything is pink. That's my paradigm. Everything is pink. Look, oh, there's a pink bird. There's a pink car. There's a pink tree. The sky is pink. Everything is pink. And that is my paradigm. And if I suddenly take off my pink glasses and put on green shaded glasses, and now all the world is green, I say, whoa, I didn't know trees were green. I didn't know cars were green. I thought they were all pink. Okay, I see a totally different perspective, a totally different picture when I change my paradigm. Okay, now how does this, let me just give you a real short story. Someone's probably going to have to watch my clock because I don't see when they're. Okay, so I got like half an hour to go.
Yeah.
Okay. A man goes into the subway early morning to commute to his job in New York City. And he's sitting down on the subway, the door opens, and a man comes in, totally disheveled, dirty, hasn't shaved in days, kind of smells weird, and he's kind of mumbling and muttering and kind of crying underneath his breath, and, you know, he's got his hat down, pulled over his eyes, and he comes in and he sits down across from the other man, and he's thinking to himself, you know, this guy's a bum, he spent the night on the street, he stinks. You know, why doesn't he get a job, take care of himself? And then the man says to him, I'm sorry, I just came from the hospital where I spent the last 3 days with my wife who passed away this morning. Is that a paradigm change? Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And here I was judging you to be a worthless person. And now I realize that you're going through a great deal of personal suffering. Okay. Same thing happens, things can happen to us when we're studying history. So what's our paradigm? Through what glasses are we looking at the history of the world? When we look at all these events that have happened in 6,000 years, how are we interpreting those? What are we seeing and what are we not seeing because of our paradigm? First of all, we believe in God. Does everybody believe in God? No, they don't. I do. I hope you do. My history class is going to assume that there is God in the world. There is a God who created the world, the earth, and all peoples on the earth. And furthermore, we believe that all people on the earth are his children, and that he still cares about us and has a hand in the events of the world. Okay, now, is this a paradigm that you would see if you were studying history class at Burley High School? No, absolutely not. As far as history class in Burley High School is concerned, there is no God. Let me ask you this. Would you have this paradigm if you were studying history class at BYU, Idaho, or BYU, Utah? Maybe, but not so much.
Why not? It's an LDS-based college.
It's an LDS-based college, but guess where they buy their history books from? The same people that sell them to the public school, the high schools. Okay? From what our experience with our kids that have gone to those church colleges, the history is pretty much the same story.
So secular.
Yes, it's a very secular history, and it's very America's number one, we're the best, never had a bad president, and so on. Okay? So that's no guarantee. What kind of problem does that create for you? Third point about our paradigm, we believe that the scriptures and the prophets provide an accurate perspective from which to interpret events. Okay, so when we study history, now I'll tell you the name of one historian who has this same paradigm. That's W. Cleon Skousen, who's written some history books. Okay, he wrote about all the Old Testament. He's written about the founding of America. And in his writing, he says this happened because God wanted it to happen this way. It was a result of divine intervention in many cases. Okay? So that's our paradigm. And I think when I show you the sources I'm using, you'll see that I'm using sources like Skousen and Dan Hunter. And not necessarily, they're not all LDS sources by any means, but they're people that share my paradigm. Okay? Now, this is your problem. Here you are coming to history class, and I'm going to teach you about history. But guess what? I'm only going to teach you about the things that I think I want to teach you about. Okay? So I now have become your pair of pink sunglasses. Okay? So how are you going to defend yourself against Mr. Fluckiger's pink sunglasses? Yeah, you're going to have to do some extracurricular study. You're going to have to do some stuff on your own. You're going to have to read from other sources. You're going to say, well, that's what Mr. Fluckiger said, but maybe I want to find out what somebody else said about it. Okay? In other words, you can be lazy and you can just agree that with me that everything I said is true, and that'd be a safe position to take. You'd be right. But
we are taught to pray about all things.
yes, you are. You can study them out in your mind and do your homework. Okay? And that's what I feel like I've done, and that I have been doing for a lot of years. Okay? And here's my last piece of my paradigm. We believe war is bad. What is an understatement?
That's a very soft way to say it.
Yeah.
It's a very soft, it's very much less than what the truth of the matter is. Not only do we believe war is bad, we think war is terrible. We think war is the worst thing that can happen in the world. We believe that war is the apogee. Now that's the other thing that's going to happen in this class. You might learn some vocabulary words that you're going to have to look up, and that's APOGEE. And what does that mean?
Pinnacle?
The very pinnacle, the very point, the top of the mountain. The war is the apogee of Satan's conquest over mankind, his success. War is the destruction of life and property. It's killing people and destroying things. And things are the things that people have made by their brains and their brawn, their study and their effort. They work to build a house. It takes a lot of time and effort, a lot of part of a man's life to build a house or to build a building or to build a car. Okay, that took a lot of investment of my effort. And now a bomb came down and blew it up. Okay, that was like tearing out a piece of my life, destroying a piece of my life. That was the fruit of my labor. Okay, so we think war is absolutely the worst thing that can happen. When you kill somebody, you kill their future. Look at all of the young men that have died in wars that never lived to have children, to build houses and businesses and become great inventors and scientists and poets and musicians and historians, because they died when they were 19 years old over in a foreign country that we had no business having a war over there in the first place. Okay? War is evil. Okay? War is absolutely evil. War, Christ is called the Prince of Peace. Okay? And he had has taught us some very specific things about war in the scriptures. And we should bear those in mind when we're studying history. Do you ever hear the term Christian soldiers? Onward, Christian soldiers, with the might of God, we're going to go out there and we're going to kill those people. Okay, that's an oxymoron. A Christian soldier is an oxymoron. And you know what that means, right? Right, Adriana, what's an oxymoron? Okay, write that in your notes too, right next to apogee, vocabulary words. There's all these words Mr. Fluckiger said that I don't know what they mean. And if you don't know what the words mean that I'm saying, you're going to have trouble catching my meaning. An oxymoron is a self-contradicting term. It's a word that is by itself a contradiction. Like well, there's tons of them. The first one that comes to my mind is government intelligence. Liberty jail. There you go. That's a great one. That's an oxymoron. Okay. 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 So I'm saying to you, Christian soldier is an oxymoron. Any person who is truly a Christian, followed the teachings of Christ, wanted to be like Christ, would not be shooting and killing people. Okay? That's not like Christ.
But in the Book of Mormon, when God said to defend.
Yes, you are right. We had to deal with Moroni. Okay, next. Why should we study history? I think we've already talked about that. The first answer to why we should study history is section 88, verses 77 to 80, 79, 80. Okay, you can write that down as the first answer because God told me to study history. But there's lots of other reasons, and we're going to talk about some of them. And I'm also going to answer the question, why should we write history essays? Now, you know, in order to graduate from American Heritage Academy, the rule was you had to write down 100 facts about each of our key dates from memory. And now, since we got so soft in our old age, we said, now you can use your notes. But you write down 100 facts, and you also write an essay. Okay, now I'm going to talk to you about the reasons why we should do that. How many of you have looked around your house and seen pictures of people, old people, like grandmas and grandpas?
Yes.
Do any of you have pictures of old people like that in your house, old relatives? Okay. How about pictures of your family and you're not in them? Any of those? There's no pictures of your family before you were born?
Well, that are hanging up. I mean, all the ones that are hanging up.
But you know, there are pictures that you're not in.
Yeah.
Okay. And when you look at those pictures, do you say to yourself, hey, wait a minute, where's me? Or you look at it and say, who's that old guy? Okay. It just looks like, you know, like studying genealogy of these old people. So you begin to say to yourself, I haven't always been here. There's been people here before me, and they had a life. They were doing stuff. You know, Grandpa had a job. He had a business. He had something. He had a family. You know, there was something about his life that has had an influence on me because his daughter married that grandpa's son. And, you know, he was a farmer and he was a salesman, and now their kids got married and now I'm here, or whatever the story is. Okay, so are you interested to know that story? You want to know who your mom and dad were and what happened, what family vacations they took before you were born, and where they lived, and what their life was like, and what your dad did for a living? What your grandma and grandpa did? Are you interested in that kind of stuff? Yeah, you should be, because that helps you understand who you are. And then what did I write? In order to know where you are and where you are headed, you must know where you have been. Okay? So this is another principle. All of you are sitting here today. You have a certain style of haircut. You have particular clothes on that you're wearing. You have notebook and pencils and a watch on your wrist. Where did all these things come from? How did they come to be? How did you come to be where you are right now? And the answer is, it's a result of decisions and events that have happened in the past. Okay, I actually think I might have that as a point. I'll make that point when I get to it. Point number 2, history breaks down the divide between all of the disciplines. Okay, so whatever you're interested in, say you're interested in airplanes. Do you think that you'll be interested in reading about Orville and Orville and Wilbur, right? How about Eddie Rickenbacker? Yeah. Okay, so if you're interested in airplanes, you're interested in these people and these events. How about that guy? Oh, I should tell you a story because this is a great history story about airplanes, which is one of the things I'm interested in. There's a guy, before the airplane was invented, before the Wright brothers invented their airplane, there was this guy that got a contract from the government to make an airplane. And they paid him what, $50,000, and then he ran out of money, and they gave him another $150,000. I mean, this is back in the day, and the Wright brothers airplane flew in 1903. So at the turn of the century, back in the 1890s, there was this guy, and you'll know his name because there's a famous airport named after him. But anyway, he was funded by the government in order to invent an airplane, and he was spending all kinds of money. And guess what? His airplanes kept crashing. He was taking them off, flying them over the river. He'd get up and then go smack down into the water, and everybody'd laugh at him and say, man's not meant to be able to fly. If God wanted man to fly, he would have given him wings and all this. And then the Wright brothers are out there by themselves, little bicycle mechanics. They spent a couple $100 like a hobby, and they made an airplane and it flew. Okay, so my point is that history covers every area of interest, every discipline, no matter what you're interested in. Medicine, music, architecture, botany, whatever you're interested in, you're going to look back at the beginnings of that field of interest, and that's going to be history that you're studying. So that's what number 2 means. Number 3, understanding history will make you a better citizen and a more thoughtful human being. What is the point of life? What is it people are trying to accomplish with their life in the world? Basically, they want to be happy and they want to be prosperous. We want to have peace and prosperity, right? Write those 2 words down. They both start with a P, so it's easy to remember. What's your goal in life? I want to have peace and prosperity. I want to get along. I don't want my kids to grow up and get killed in a war. I want to have peace with myself. I want to be able to pursue my own interests and my own ambitions. How are we going to accomplish that? What's the best way to accomplish peace and prosperity? And the answer is you can learn some very important keys to that by studying history. Okay, here President Trump's got all these grand ideas. He's got a war going on right now called a trade war with China. He's putting billions of dollars of tariffs on China. China turns around and puts billions of dollars of tariffs on the United States. And then Trump turns around and puts billions of more dollars of tariffs on China. China turns around and puts billions of more dollars of tariffs on the United States. What's going on? Has that ever happened before in history? Have we ever seen what the results of tariff wars is? Is there some way to predict the future from these things? And the answer is yes. This is nothing new under the sun, and we know perfectly well what is going to happen if this is pursued. Number 4, history cures the ingratitude caused by ignorance of the work and sacrifice given us by others. Okay, now this is what I'm talking about. Why do you suppose the church spends hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not scores of thousands of dollars, helping people go out to Wyoming and to walk over the trails on the mountains? Why does the church do that? Why do we have hundreds of missionaries out there that are taking thousands of youth, 17 to 20,000 a summer, over these rocky ridge trails and pushing hand carts? Why? To remember our history, to cure the ingratitude caused by ignorance. Okay? In order for you to appreciate what you have, you need to have some understanding of what sacrifices were made to provide it for you. Okay? That's studying history. That's studying history. And is ingratitude a disease? Ingratitude is not a good thing. You know, if you have something that is very valuable and you treat it lightly and esteem it as not, that's not a good thing. And that is one thing that kind of ticks off Heavenly Father. When you are not grateful. Here he has given you this beautiful world. It's got green grass and green trees and blue skies and birds that sing and bees that hum. And you're walking around totally oblivious to it and you don't even care. And Heavenly Father said, wake up, pay attention, and look around you. Don't you see this beautiful world I made for you? Okay, say thank you. All right? That's ingratitude, and that is one of the things that offends God. So we want to cure that. We want to cure that by having some appreciation and understanding of what's happened in the past. Number 5, nothing ever had to happen the way it did. Actions have consequences. Nothing happens in a vacuum. And now this is a kind of a dangerous territory. Some people speculate. They go do what's called historical speculation. They say, what if Archduke Ferdinand hadn't been assassinated on that fateful day in August in Serbia? Would there have been a World War I? Or, would there have been something else that happened? Okay. So there are these there are these important events that happen throughout history, and you have to realize that all of the actors in history were human beings, just like you are a human being. And you know that you always have choices. You always have 2 roads diverged in a distant wood, and I took the one less traveled, or those were the left road and the right road. Okay, you don't always necessarily have to take the road that everybody else took. And as a result of making a different choice, you're going to have different consequences. Nobody ever lived in the past. Nobody ever knew the future perfectly. The present is the result of the past. Human nature has not changed. This is what I was talking to you about, the clothes you're wearing, the pen you're using to write with. All these things that appear today are a result of stuff that's happened in the past. Decisions that were made in the past, choices. Why am I living in this house? Why am I married to that woman? Why do I drive that car that I have in my garage? All of these things are the result of decisions and events that have happened in the past. Okay? And if I want my future to be different, I have to realize that the decisions I'm making now are going to change the future. Would you like to be able to predict the future? Then you need to understand what's happening now and in the past. And it says human nature has not changed. So we've got all these stories about Adam and Eve and Noah and Abraham from long time ago. Guess what? Those people were people just like we are people. Human nature has not changed. What is human nature? What is the nature of human beings? You're a human being. What's your nature? To be selfish. Selfishness is human nature. Absolutely. How about lazy? Is lazy human nature?
Yeah.
Yes. I always want to do something with the least amount of effort. If there's an easier way to do something, I'd like to do that instead of the hard way. Okay? So for the fact that you're human, how many of you have been punched in the nose once or twice in your life? Do you know what it feels like to be punched in the nose then? Do you have to have been punched in the nose to know what it feels like? Okay, this is another aspect of human nature. We have empathy. We don't have to actually have experienced everything ourselves. We don't have to have a bomb dropped on our house to know how it would feel to have my house blown up or burned down. Okay, because I know that somebody else that had that experience and I can empathize with them. Okay, this is a unique characteristic, a good characteristic of humanity, of human nature. Okay, and the point I'm making is that all these people throughout history were human beings just like we are. Okay, so we can relate to their experiences. We can say to ourselves, how did George Washington feel about being persuaded by James Madison to go to that Constitutional Convention? Why did he not want to go? Okay. Number 7, understanding history is a cure for hubris. I don't know if all of you know what hubris is, but that's another vocabulary word. What have we got? 3 words we learned today? Holy mackerel. Don't you think that's a bit much? Okay, cool it already. No more hard words. Hubris is arrogant pride. Hubris is the idea that I am the greatest and I can cure any problem by passing a law. Okay, the hubris of the present is the idea that we are the ultimate, we are the best, we are the smartest, we know everything. Okay, and hubris is a disease that afflicts politicians in particular, but other people as well. We went to a bicycle race a couple of weekends ago with our grandson. Dylan was out there, and the guy was out interviewing the racers before they started the race. And the guy said, I'm here from Boise, and I'm here to win this race. I'm going to win this race. Okay? And guess what? He came in like 25th. Okay? That was hubris. It was arrogant pride. It was the idea that he was the best. He was going to win. And we like to avoid that problem. Number 8, to avoid the errors of the past, solve the problems of the present and accurately predict the future. Okay? That's what history can do for us. And I'm going to leave that there just for a second because, well, all you have to write down is past, present, future. How does history help us? Past, avoid the errors of the past. We look in the history and we see people made mistakes. They had bad consequences for the choices and actions that they took and made. We are going to do something different. We don't want to make those same mistakes. What do they say? It's a foolish man that has to learn everything from his own mistakes, and a wise man that learns from the mistakes of others. That was said by Mr. Fluckiger, Confucius, somebody like that. Solve the problems of the present and accurately predict the future. Okay, going on. Oh, no, it's still there. I'm on number 9. And why do we write history essays? To demonstrate that we have considered the lessons of history and have learned something from them. So, okay, I'm going to talk to you about this key dates concept. We want, in order for you to graduate and be a self-respecting high school graduate in the United States of America, we want you to recognize that you learned something about history in order to graduate from American Heritage Academy. Okay? You can't be self-respecting. And it's not just a matter of memorizing dates and events and places. You got to have some lesson out of it. What's the point of it? If you haven't learned some lesson about what should be done in the world, what should be different in the world from what it is. Okay? And there's going to be a recording. Let me talk to you quick about how we study history. My wife said that we are running out of time. So I'm gonna go into 78 RPM. We have key dates. There's 20 key dates. I want you to think of there's 2 ways to think of key dates. One way is to think of the first way I used to say is branches on a Christmas tree. We draw a Christmas tree like this, and then on each branch we're going to say this branch is 4000 BC. This branch is 2344 BC. This branch is 1776, and then we're going to hang a lot of ornaments on each branch. Okay, so we got the Battle of Bunker Hill. Where does that go? That goes on the 1776 branch, or it doesn't belong down. Okay, and so somebody asked the question, now wait a minute, there's a city of Enoch, and then there's Noah's flood. Are those on the same branch? Was the city of Enoch on the same branch? We got 4000, 2344, 2000, 1500 BC, 1000 BC. Okay, here's the idea. When you have all these events and these stories in history, you want to have them connected to the branch they belong in. Okay, another way you can think of it is as rooms in a house. Here I've got a house, and in my living room, I have a piano and a couch and a fireplace and a light fixture, whatever. And when you see that fireplace, you say, oh yeah, I know that fireplace belongs in the living room. It doesn't belong in the bedroom. It doesn't belong in the basement. It doesn't belong in the garage. It belongs in the living room. Okay? And so you get this association between the events and the room. Okay, so the event, the key date is the room. Okay, our first key date is 1492. What's 1492? Colonization of America, Christopher Columbus. Oh yeah, I know. That's the room, and what belongs in that? Well, we've got the conquistadors. They came to Mexico and burned their boats. Montezuma, whatever. Well, that belongs in 1492. That belongs in that room right there. You don't get confused and say, when was that? Was that 1850 or 1925? Okay, you say that was 1492. That belongs in. So that's the concept of key dates. We used to require you to memorize all 20 key dates. I'm just getting soft in my old age. I've already sent your mom a list with all the 20 key dates. I want you to print that out and put it in the front of your binder so you know how that goes. But at any rate, that's the concept of key dates. What sources am I using? Where do I get my information? Well, you don't have to write this down in your notes. Dan Hunter is an LDS author that has written a PhD dissertation on world history and U.S. history, and he's got these volumes and volumes of books that are sitting up there on top of my desk. He's one of the main ones that I use. I also use Wikipedia, and I want to say something about Wikipedia. If you go to college and you cite Wikipedia as a source, they'll probably mark you down for it or disallow it. Why? Because it's not a scholarly source. It's a, anybody can write anything they want on Wikipedia, right? Do you know how Wikipedia works? They got all these articles about every obscure thing you can imagine under the sun, and they're all written by ordinary people. So would you want to rely on that versus the guy that has his stamp of approval from the court, the king, the court historian? Okay, that's the deal. Actually, they have done a study on the information that's on Wikipedia as compared with the information that is approved in the scholarly journals, and guess which is more accurate more of the time? Wikipedia. Because Wikipedia is open source. Anybody can write anything they want. Now, here's a guy who said, my grandfather fought in the Civil War, and I'm telling you, at the Battle of Chickamauga, he wasn't coming from the South. He came in from the East. And so he gets on Wikipedia, and he writes his version of the Battle of Chickamauga in the Civil War, and it turns out that it's more accurate. It's more correct because it is open source, exactly. Okay, but the scholarly journals look down on it because it's, you could have stuff, and there is stuff on there that people totally made up. Okay. But usually what happens is somebody who cares about that subject will get right in there behind them and say, that's totally made up. That's false. They edit it, they delete it, and it's corrected in a very short period of time. So Wikipedia is a good source. If you want to do it, when you want to do additional research on a topic, that's the place that I can recommend that you use. There's a guy by the name of Tom Woods who's not LDS, but he is a PhD historian, and he believes in God, and he probably doesn't write history necessarily from a religious perspective, but he is very interested in the same things I am, which is truth. And he's got a whole history course that he's put online called Liberty Classroom. Actually, it's not just history, a lot of history, but a lot of other things as well. That's one of the sources that I use for my information. And all of his professors are PhDs in their subjects. And then carefully selected supplementary books, movies, and etc. Now I'm just going to tell you, and we'll talk about this again when the time comes up. You got to be really, really careful about learning your history from movies. Like, for example, maybe you've heard of a movie called Pocahontas. I think Walt Disney made one like that. Or maybe you heard about a movie called The Coat of Many Colors, or something. Didn't Walt Disney make a movie about Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat? Okay, you realize that when people are making movies, there's a lot of movies made about history. I mean, a lot of historical events that are made into movies because these are great stories. But you got to realize that the people are making those movies are in it for the money. They want to make a movie that is popular, that people are going to pay tickets to watch. And so sometimes they take some liberties that give you the wrong impression about the real history.
Well, like the Ten Commandments.
Like the Ten Commandments, Cecil B. DeMille.
And so I watched that when I was really young.
Yeah.
And so that's what goes through my head. Sure.
Yeah. And I've heard a kid say in Sunday school class before, when they were talking about a Book of Mormon story, and they were saying, we read the scriptures, and here's what it says happened when we read the Book of Mormon. And the kid raises his hand and said, no, that's not what happened because I saw the movie. I saw the Book of Mormon movie. They have these little living scripture videos. And this is what happened. Okay, I saw it in living scriptures. But guess what? Those are not the original source. The original source is the Book of Mormon itself. All right? So careful about the movies that you decide to believe. What we ask you to do when you're sitting here, just like what you've been doing, you're seeing. You see this with your eyes. And you hear me talking to you with your ears. And then you write with your hands, which requires a mental connection between your hand and your brain. So that's what happens in class. After class, you're going to go home and you're going to review your notes. You're going to read them maybe fill them out because I was going too fast for you to fill in all the details. And you said, oh, this is what he said right here. And so you fill that in. That's called review.
Can't they watch?
And you can watch it again if you want to watch it online. We got to only meet once a week, which is really not enough. I know it's very, very hard to remember something for a whole week. But next week when you come here on Wednesday, the first thing that's going to happen is I'm going to hand you a piece of paper with questions on it. And the questions are going to be about everything I told you today. And you have no idea what I'm going to ask you. I could ask you anything I talked about today. I could ask you anything that's been on any of these slides. And you're going to sit down there and you're going to say, oh, what's the answer to that question? What's the answer? And you're going to fill out the answers the best you can remember. Okay? And that is the extent of the work in this course. You come to class once a week for an hour or more if we have technical troubles. And then you take a quiz. There's no homework that I'm going to make you go. I mean, you're going to have to write your essays on your own and write your history facts on your own. But really, there's nothing else you have to do as part of this class. Okay, it's easy class. And then when we're going to correct the quiz in class. We're going to talk about the answers and say, remember, I said this, this, this. And that's going to be your score. You're going to get 100%. Put that in your binder. Then that's your grade at the end of the semester. We take all your quizzes and add them up and divide by how many quizzes you had. That's your grade. Easy peasy, right? Okay, so that's how the class is going to happen. Sometimes I'm going to ask you to think. Thinking is sometimes not very fun. As a matter of fact, there's a famous person, probably George Bernard Shaw, somebody like that, said, thinking is the hardest thing. Most people would rather die than think. They'd rather do anything than think. How do you think? When I tell you to somebody, I want you to think about a pink elephant. What happens? Okay, so the first thing that happens is you picture it in your mind. And then I say, okay, keep thinking about that pink elephant. And then what happens next? You what?
Well, in my case, my mind starts falling.
You're not supposed to wander where? Wander where?
To different things.
To pink mice instead of pink elephants. I want you to think about pink elephants. All right, go ahead, do it right now. Think about pink elephants. What's happening in your brain? Think, pink elephants. Okay, so you got a picture in your mind. What happens next? I keep thinking, okay, I got the picture, I got the pink elephant. But I want you to keep thinking about it. What happens next after you got the picture? You have to begin asking yourself questions. Say, how did he get pink? Elephants are supposed to be gray. And, okay, the process of thinking is the process of considering, asking yourself questions and maybe answering the questions inside your mind. Okay? And so when we're talking about the Civil War or the Constitutional Convention and I ask you to think about it, you're going to picture it in your mind. You're going to ask yourself questions about it. You can write those questions down on your piece of paper. And then these are the things I'm thinking about. I'm asking myself questions. Okay? So that's a good thing. Additional research. I'm not going to tell you everything you possibly need to know or can know about a subject. You're going to pick a lesson from history that you're going to be writing about in each topic. Maybe it's Christopher Columbus, and you're asking, think about Christopher Columbus. Who was he? Why was he so possessed with the idea of getting in a boat and sailing across the Atlantic Ocean? And everybody thought they would fall off the edge of the earth. Okay, you're going to do some additional. I'm going to read his journal. I'm not going to be able to spend time in class reading his journal to you, but you're going to do some additional research on the particular subject that you choose. And last but not least, there's the 20 key dates. You don't have to copy these down because, as I said, I've already sent a paper to your mother and she's got them. You're going to print that out and put that in your binder. If I was ambitious and if my printer worked from my computer, I would have printed it, copied it on a copy machine, punched 3 holes in it, and passed it out to you today. But my printer and my computer are not getting along right now, so I didn't do that. I said, I'm going to send it to your mother instead. Okay, any questions or comments before we quit? That's it for today. Yes.
So does there need to be something written about today? A little